Hello, TPR Nation. This is Amber Keem from The Perfect REA. Thank you for joining me on today's Spotlight Friday, where I'll be covering the highlights and action items from this week's episodes. On Monday, Matt and Micah shared that they're in the midst of search and how excited they are to meet with clients. But they said this is also the time that proves everything they've been talking about in the interim. Matt said that there can sometimes be a disconnect between how you think search is going to work, and then when you're in it, it gives you that opportunity to prove the systems that you're using, as well as start making a list of things that you want to change for the next search cycle. The guy said that there can be this temptation that once search ends for you to just coast through to the end of the year. And then next year will start, and then you end up going through the same thing, and then you look at your practice and you realize that you're still more or less in the same spot. So it's not by default that your practice will grow, and moving your practice or finding the right CRM isn't going to help either. They said that is an example of playing office. Now, one of the rules of the Perfect RA is to do what works. So when things are coming up that promise to solve all your problems, the guy said to look at whether you're just chasing a shiny object, and then find an advisor who's ideally at a level above you and ask them if that particular thing actually moved their practice. Matt and Micah mentioned some of the traps that advisors fall into related to whether they're successful or not, such as location or marketing, which Micah mentioned that he spent a lot of money with some marketing companies and he had no measurable results. Another trap advisors easily fall into is investment performance or investment models. They said it's easy to fall into this because you're mostly paid from investments and you discount the value that you provide outside of that. But they said that the way that you're paid doesn't mean that that's the only way that you add value. Another trap is the F word. Not that one. Fiduciary. The guys equated this to designations, and that having however many designations doesn't attribute directly to success. They're proponents of continuing education, but you can't base your success on that. So with all these traps, each of them can make a small difference to your practice, so they aren't bad things. But the issue is when you think that they are the solution. Because they aren't. If you aren't doing key things, then nothing else is going to matter. So what is something that'll help your practice improve? The guy said there's one particular thing that they've done that not only improves their practice, but when they've stopped doing it, their practice doesn't grow as much. It's when you sit down once a year and actually do real business planning. They said it's easy to fall into those other traps and distractions that are out there and hope that something is just going to work. So they said to think about when was the last time that you sat down with other advisors and wrote out your business plan for the next year. Matt and Micah then talked about working on business plan that works. They just went through this with their Invictus members in September, and even though it wasn't at the end of the year, they said you want to get queued up for that. So somewhere between September and November is really that sweet spot. Micah said you want to design this when you're still in the heat of the year, so you can look at your numbers and see if you're on track. You can pivot in Q4 and then set the stage for Q1 while you're in Q4. He said if you wait to do this on December 31st, it just isn't going to be as effective because it's going to take you a while to get things implemented. When doing this, they said you need to have real numbers, and they recommend having your team pull the numbers to make sure that they match up with what you think they really are. So these can include your P&L, number of meetings held, and how much is each client actually paying. Once you get the numbers and do a solid review, then you need to look forward. Micah recommends doing this in 3 to 5 year increments. Look at what you want to see accomplished. Where do you want your practice and your personal life to be, and how do you balance that? From there, you can start dialing it back to what does 1 year look like, then a quarter, and then the month and the week. They said you need to look at activities that are going to get you to your goals. So your business plan needs to have those things that you can control, and it needs to be on your calendar. And you need to hold yourself accountable to the activities, and then you need to be able to measure it. They said it's so important to have this business plan because then you can go back and check it and compare it on a quarterly basis to see where you are compared to the plan. You also need to have this somewhere that you can regularly see it, because when the channels that you're using hit a roadblock, you need to have something to work on that still keeps you on that plan's path in the meantime. Let's get into action items. Matt and Micah mentioned our open enrollment this week. Now, if you missed the chance to join our coaching and membership programs, reach out to us at lifestyletheperfectRE.com, and our team can help guide you to some resources that'll help you, such as our one-page financial plan masterclass, or our estate planning masterclass, or a search checklist. Acknowledge that it's hard to build a successful practice and to make sure that you're finding people who can help you. Also, make sure that you have an assistant, whether that's in person or virtual, and you can text Belay at 55123 to get their ebook on working with a virtual assistant. Lastly, visit theperfectre.com/quiz to see where you can improve your practice. Speaking of Belay, on Wednesday, we had a special episode as Micah took over our guest episodes to chat with Theresa Summerlin from Belay to talk about how you need to move your practice to the next level and what team members you need in place to do this. Now, when this was recorded, Micah was in between assistants, so he brought up the situation that he had run into with assistants personally. His assistant was promoted within his company. He hired another one who wasn't the right fit, and then he became his own assistant, and he was dealing with that pain point of knowing that he should get another one because he's doing the task that could be delegated, but he just didn't want to go through that process again. Theresa said you need to look at what is the cost of you continuing to do what you're doing that an assistant should be doing for you. And that could be financial or peace of mind knowing that something isn't getting dropped. So you need to think about whether it's worth it to try again. She said if you can articulate what didn't go right, then it helps someone such as Belay understand what you're looking for. Theresa said that there are core characteristics in people that make great administrative assistants, so they can get up to speed pretty quickly, and the right person will get you to where you need them to sooner. Theresa said the time expectation for someone getting up to speed is generally around 90 days, but it also depends on their responsibilities outside of managing a workflow and whether you've committed to investing your time into onboarding them. This needs to be a partnership, so communication and feedback is key, but you do need to put in that time up front. So for that amount of time, she said that the first thing is deciding what your communication cadence will look like and what are your expectations. And you need to really be talking with your assistant every day, at least in the beginning. Mike and Theresa talked more about communication cadence and tracking, and she said that she encourages clients to think about the day-to-day communication. She said you can set the protocol for how you're sharing tasks and thoughts and what the expectations are, but then also make sure that you have a backup protocol for anything with a higher sense of urgency, which might be a text or a phone call. Mike and Theresa also talked about a benefit into working with a company such as Belay on bringing on an assistant, which in Micah's case, he went through the entire hiring process himself. But if he had worked with Belay and the assistant wasn't the right fit, they could have worked to understand more into what Micah was needing and looking for, what was the miss, and then identify another candidate. They wrapped up by sharing that if you're looking for an easy button, the best bet is to work with a company like Belay to help you get the right person so that you can build and grow. And if you are currently your own assistant, you need to look to see if it's holding you back in your growth and how do you start to delegate to get things off of your plate. This Wednesday's action item was to text RAA to 55123 to get Belay's ebook on working with an assistant. And you can also learn more about Belay by visiting belaysolutions.com. On Thursday, Jamie was talking about how to avoid conflict, confusion, and misunderstanding. She said there's a lot of different generations across the industry and that miscommunications are easy to fix if you pause and realize that at the end of the day, we're all humans. She shared a story from her childhood that involved some rumors between her and a girl she was friends with, where ultimately she went to confront the girl and address those rumors. And surprise, they were able to talk through it. She shared a lesson that her dad, Floyd Shalansky, shared that stuck with her, which is that 85% of confrontations, both parties don't want to be where they're at. But that 15%, you better be ready for. And she always remembers this because 85% of the time when you're frustrated or something makes you mad, you're jumping to conclusions to guess where someone's motive is and making assumptions to validate your feelings. So you end up demonizing someone without stopping to talk about the problem. But most of the time when you're confronting someone, you'll remember the human quality and not wish them harm. She said it's easy to get absent-minded when you're in the pursuit of perfection and remembering that other people are humans in the pursuit of perfection as well. So imagine if you have a conflict or resistance. Instead of going to the worst place in your mind, you pause your feelings and you have control and discipline and actually have a verbal conversation with someone. Jamie said that there are stylistic differences in the way that some people communicate, and that can be between generations or genders or rank. That there are so many tactics that you have to take to navigate in a world where so much of your success is hinged upon communication. She talked further about this related to communicating with prospects. She brought up what this would look like if she brings someone in and she's just not communicating with them. Maybe they're cutting her off, or maybe she's not understanding something that they're saying. She said if you can't communicate well in a prospect situation, then you definitely won't be able to communicate in a client situation. So this is a perfect example of why your success is contingent on your ability to communicate. Jamie said that communication is key to your success and also the success of those that you're bringing into your team. And this is why they run that DIS report in her office, which she mentioned a few weeks ago. This allows her to understand her team's individual communication styles and explain her communication style and how she will adapt to her team. She said, when it comes to running your team, your appointments, raising your kids, think about how you can take what you know about communication and adapt those skills and hit pause during conflict. Her lesson with this and what she experienced in her youth was to talk to others as human beings and search for middle ground and to compromise and have discussions instead of arguments. Let's get into this Thursday's action items. During the next 30 days, can you hit pause on your emotions and your knee-jerk reactions? Instead, have the tough talks and the communications that matter. That wraps up this week's recap. Thank you for joining me, and please share this or any of our episodes with another advisor or a team member who you think might benefit from listening. And until next time, happy planning.